Hi, everybody. We're just going to wait until right around 12 Eastern, just letting everyone get in and get settled, but wanted to make sure I got in early to share screen. Hi, everybody. Welcoming all the new faces who have joined. We're going to get started in a few minutes here. Just giving everyone a few moments until it's officially 12 Eastern to come in. All right, it is officially 12 p.m. Eastern. Hello, everybody. Can you go ahead and drop in the chat a yes or a hi if you can hear me and see me okay and the screen is shared perfectly? Amazing. Awesome. So excited to have you all here today. As promised, I'm going to get started right on time because there's a lot to get through. So thank you all so much for being here. Drop in the chat where you are calling in from today, because we had people register from 25 countries, and that just blows my mind, in all different states throughout the United States. Oh my goodness, Sweden, yay. New York, Texas, Oregon, California, Canada. Wow, Finland and Dubai. Oh my gosh, Hong Kong. It must be either very late or very early for you. Oh my gosh, it's so cool to see all of the different places. And every time I do a webinar like this, I'm always reminded that we are never alone in the thoughts that we have or the anxieties we face, because so many people decided to join today. So it's just such a cool reminder. Thank you all for sharing. All right, I have a few considerations and housekeeping notes as we go through this presentation today. Some are specific to the webinar, some are just in general for my work really, but I always like to give the disclaimer. Those who have followed me for a while know and have seen this many times that my work does not apply to abusive relationships. So please keep that in mind. This webinar also is not going to give individuals a yes or no answer because everyone is so unique. There's no one size fits all, but the intention is going to be to use this framework and this information to empower you to better answer the question of, is it anxiety or incompatibility for yourself? Use today, please, as a chance to get curious and reflect. Anxiety likes to make us think that there is an urgent decision that has to be made or that we need to figure something out right away, but just use it as a chance to start getting curious and really understanding your relationship in a deeper level. Another disclaimer I like to give, I am not here to influence you to stay or go from your relationship. Really, that's always going to be your decision and your responsibility to make that decision. But I'm here to share my story, share some information, and in that you may have more information to better understand your decision for yourself. My plan is to spend 60 minutes presenting. I tried to cut it down, but there's just so much I want to share with you all today. So it's going to be around 60 minutes of presenting and then 30 to 45 minutes of Q&A. Of course, at any time, if you have to jump off, the recording is there for you. I do want to highlight that I'm going to try to look at the chat box, but I'm not the best at multitasking. And so please save all of your questions for the end. Even if a question comes through during the middle, I ask that you jot it down and save it for our time at the end together, just in order to get through the full presentation. And then lastly, I want to encourage you to listen today without feeling the need to take notes on every single thing I'm saying. I've been to many presentations where I'm trying to jot every single word down, and then I forget or don't even remember the whole point of why I was even there in the first place. So please try and just listen, with an open mind and open heart, and trust that if you need to, you can go back to the recording another time. And before we get too much further, this is something I do with all my private clients and for all of my group programs. I really want to just take a few deep breaths together because understandably, this topic can bring up some nerves and maybe you have a nervous energy as you're sitting here. I know I get a little nervous when I'm doing public speaking. So for all of our sakes, let's go ahead and just take a few deep breaths together. And if you feel comfortable, feel free to close your eyes alongside me. If not, you can go ahead and just look somewhere away from the screen, whatever you're most comfortable with. But I'm going to go ahead and close my eyes. If you would like, you can also place one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach, just to bring yourself a sense of groundedness and safety into your body right now. And let's go ahead and just wherever you are seated or standing, however you're listening, just try and find some stillness if it's safe to do so. And let's ease into this hour and a half that we have together. And let's go ahead and first take a deep inhale through the nose. And slowly release it through the mouth. Really celebrating yourself for even being here today or for catching the recording. Something that is telling you that you're invested in your growth and your learning, so celebrating that. Let's go ahead and take a second deep inhale now through the nose. And sigh it out. Just trusting that whatever comes up for you today as you listen is okay, and trusting that you'll take away whatever you need to hear from me today in this presentation. And one final breath, let's do another deep inhale. And exhale. Alrighty, and we can come back into the virtual room here together in 3, 2, 1. I love doing those, and a reminder that those 3 breaths are available to you at any time throughout your day, and they can make a big difference. All right, so I wanted to give a quick overview of what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to start off by giving a quick introduction of myself and my story. Some people just signed up yesterday and they had just followed me yesterday for the first time. So there are definitely some new faces around here. It will be familiar for those who have followed me for some time now. I'm going to then define relationship anxiety and why it tends to show up. I think this is a big important piece of the puzzle today to understand, of course. Then I'm going to talk you through the incompatibility indicator framework that I have come up with to help you understand what may be incompatibility, what may not be incompatibility, and everything in between. Then we're going together to define a healthy and compatible enough relationship. What does that mean? And how do you know if you are in a compatible enough relationship to be confident moving forward in that? And then how to move forward with this information. And of course, we will have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion after the presentation. All right, so just a little bit about me. For those who don't know, hi, I'm Sarah Yudkin. This is a picture of me and my boyfriend, Nate, who is the best. We have been together for 5.5 years now. And funny enough, even though I coach about relationship anxiety, when I first met Nate, I had this feeling like he was so special. He may be my person. And I was very excited about where the relationship was going. If this hasn't been your experience, that's okay. There's no right or wrong, but I did feel those excitement feelings that people talk about. But then funny enough, when things became more serious, which is a trend I notice a lot, the pressure externally and internally got to me. So the external pressure of, oh my gosh, do you think he could be the one? How do you know? Oh my gosh, tell me everything. Like all of those questions that are very well intended got to me specifically. And then the internal pressure of, well, my parents got divorced, a few years ago. So what if that happens to me? And some of those thoughts that I kept having made me feel anxious. So safe to say, is it anxiety or incompatibility was a common question of mine. And I'll share an example later to help illustrate that exact point. But in May 2020, there were a lot of things happening at once. The pandemic was happening. I was on furlough from my 9-to-5 job, so I wasn't working. Me and Nate had just moved in together for the first time, living at his mom's house. So there were just a lot of things happening that had my anxiety coming to its peak. And one day when Nate and I were on a walk, I even went as far as to say, I'm not sure I love you the same way anymore. And his kindness and compassion and empathy towards me in that moment, after saying something that felt so harsh and just so much like against him and the relationship, he was just so kind and loving towards me. And almost like that, I was like, whoa, this is someone that cares about me so deeply, who I have so much love and respect for. I need to figure out what's going on in a more serious way, because I had just kind of been anxious without looking for answers. So that was what led me to create my blog. I wanted to learn how to be in a good relationship because no one teaches us these things. And so I set out on a fact-finding mission to learn all of this. I started sharing my story, and I quickly realized that hundreds and thousands, and now almost 200,000 people between Instagram and TikTok are resonating with this message. So it's clear that a lot of people needed to hear my story and just talk about this a lot more. So now my mission is to normalize doubts in loving, healthy relationships in a world that doesn't normalize it. But it's a world that says, oh, it's the biggest decision you'll ever make to commit to somebody, and then doesn't normalize having doubt. So it doesn't fully add up. And then just a quick little, blurb about me and my qualifications. So I'm a trauma-informed coach. I took training from a trauma therapist. I'm currently working my way through an ICF coaching certification, International Coaching Federation. And I also coach from personal experience and my own therapy and research. All right, let's go into defining what relationship anxiety is. And please know that this definition can vary. Everyone experiences different flavors of it, but I'm defining it here for this presentation as recurring doubts or anxiety about a safe, healthy, loving relationship that prevents you from showing up in your life and relationship in ways that you would like to. So you're not showing up from an open-hearted place because you're so nervous or anxious. You're not showing up with love as much as you would like to. And you're not showing up with as much compassion for your partner or yourself as you would like to. And as I said, this can look different for everyone. There is no right or wrong. And I will say that a lot in this presentation. But my specific thoughts of relationship anxiety, as you can see, this is a photo captured at my best friend's wedding, where I was not necessarily feeling so happy and excited of Nate grabbing me there. But my thoughts were, do I love him enough? Am I settling? I don't feel love right now. I'm not attracted to him. This quality irritates me. This must mean it's always going to irritate me. Drop in the chat if this is resonating with you, because I feel like a lot of us can agree that these are thoughts that come up a lot. Is this anxiety or intuition? That was a really big one. That has come up for me a lot and a ton of my clients. And then one of my biggest ones was people say when you know, but I don't know. And that used to paralyze me to my core. So just know that if you've ever thought some of these things, you're not alone. And also know that sometimes relationship anxiety will almost reverse itself and have you worrying, am I good enough? Does my partner love me enough? And is my anxiety going to affect how we're showing up in the relationship? So if you've ever thought any of these thoughts and more, please know you're not alone. Of course, there's many others, too much to fit into one presentation here. So I want to give everyone an overview of why relationship anxiety can happen. This presentation isn't solely focused on relationship anxiety, so I can't go into as much detail as I would like, but I really wanted to help people understand why relationship anxiety shows up, to one, normalize it for you, and also have you having some dots connected of like, wow, I can see why I may feel anxious in my relationship, and starting to feel compassion for why this is showing up for you. Because I know that shame and feeling like I'm doing something wrong, this is not right, can cause a lot more anxiety. So I will go over these in a little bit more detail here in the following slides, but just to give you an overview, relationship anxiety can happen because of past experiences and or traumas. So big T traumas like abuse or a really nasty divorce in the family, or small T traumas like our middle school boyfriend telling us that we weren't pretty or something like that. Those all stick with us. And by being human, we all have past experiences or traumas that can affect how we show up. Our beliefs and expectations of love. How are we expecting love to be? And is it matching up with what's going on in our relationship? Our core fears. This is such a big one. I talk about this a lot, but what are you scared of beneath the anxious thoughts? And how is that manifesting in your relationship? Anxiety, OCD, and intrusive thoughts latching onto things we care most about, AKA our relationships. Cultural and societal messaging and noise. I don't know about any of you, but social media comparison and just like seeing celebrities or even family and friends relationships, we can get so easily stuck on, is ours like that? Are we good enough? And then asking unanswerable questions. We tend to do that a lot when we're in an anxious place, and that can lead to more rumination and spiraling. So let's break these down each in a little bit more detail. I also, with each piece of this webinar, not to do right now because there's going to be some reflection and quiet time needed for you to actually do these things, but I'm going to provide an opportunity for further integration with everything I'm sharing with you today, because I really want you to learn from this webinar and take some things, and whether you're processing it with a coach or a therapist or on your own, I want you to feel like you have actionable steps to take with you after this webinar to kind of process some of what I'm sharing with you. So that will be where you see the opportunities for integration sections. Again, please feel free to go back and watch this and take notes on them so that you have a chance to focus. So past experiences or traumas, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to give some examples of what this could be. So you could have had traumatic breakups in the past, whether it's yours or your caretaker's. There could be past abuse that has happened, or even past experiences of your caretakers having the seemingly perfect relationship. I've had a lot of clients worry that their relationship is actually not good enough because their parents or their caretakers was seemingly perfect. They never saw any arguing and everything seemed happy-go-lucky, and then that makes them feel less than about theirs. So as far as integration here, ways that you can kind of try and process your past experiences or traumas, first and foremost, if you have severe trauma or any sort of trauma that you want to process, I recommend processing it somatically and or in trauma therapy. So somatically through the body, not just trying to think your way through it, but actually tending to the body memories that have been stored within you of this past experience. So that's my first and foremost recommendation. But beyond that, or alongside it, you can continue, to gain awareness of how your past experiences have affected your beliefs on love and relationships. So You want to validate yourself because you have these beliefs and experiences that are coming up. And a lot of times our goal is to self-protect. But some of these beliefs may no longer be helpful for you as you move forward in your relationship. So let me give an example here. So my parents got a divorce, and I used to think that because of that, I would automatically get a divorce. Looking at it now, it seems a little bit silly, but in the time I was thinking that, it made sense. Like, well, that's what I saw. And so that's going to happen to me. That's all I know. But now I've shifted into believing to my core, because I've learned so much in the last few years, I am capable of learning how to show up in my relationship with Nate and generating more love over time, connecting more over time. So the protective story that's no longer needed was my parents got a divorce, so I will too. It's kind of like protecting myself, playing small, not going all in into my relationship, because that probably means that I'll get a divorce anyway. So why bother? So that would be a great thing to process, again, with a therapist or coach, because sometimes past experiences or traumas can bring up a lot of emotion for us. So just know that you're not alone if you have any of those stories. Okay, next, beliefs and expectations on love, with some photos from some of my favorite rom-coms to illustrate the point. But whether or not you think these things consciously or subconsciously, I bet you a lot of you can relate. Feel free to drop it in the chat so people realize they're not alone here. But these beliefs show up in our relationship so frequently. I should be attracted and in love 24/7. They should get me and make me happy, complete me. We should enjoy the exact same things. They shouldn't be too different from me. If they wanted to, they would. Never settle. When you know. Happily ever after, and the soulmate and twin flames belief systems that we see showing up a lot lately. And insert yours here. Camilla said, if we argue, I worry, if we argue, I worry, we argue too much. Yes, that is a really great point. And there's a lot of these things that can have us thinking, if our relationship isn't perfectly what we're expecting, then our relationship is not good enough. And so in order to shift out of this, we have to do an inventory of our belief system when it comes to love and relationships. And whether this is proactively sitting down, like I'm recommending here, and writing out a beliefs around love list, or just catching yourself as you notice things coming up, go through your beliefs on love and relationships one-on-one, or one by one rather, and ask, does this advice make me feel empowered and inspired for my relationship, or does it make me feel not enough in my relationship? How are these beliefs making me feel? Because if it makes you feel good, that's incredible. Keep believing that. Like, I know some people who love to believe in the idea of a soulmate and it makes them feel excited. But a lot of times when I thought about the idea of a soulmate, it made me feel so anxious and crippled. Like, what if this isn't my soulmate and I have one soulmate only? And if I don't find them, then I'm doing something wrong. So if the belief doesn't make you feel good, you have full permission to rewrite it. One example I shared earlier that made me really anxious. People say, when you know, but I don't always know. This used to cripple me. I used to be so worried that I didn't 100% know. But then I realized that I tend to have a hard time making big decisions and commitments, and that's okay. So that is a new belief that I have. It's okay if I've taken some time to analyze or, think about this big decision in my life. It's okay. So you have an opportunity to kind of shed some of these old narratives and stories that are not helping you anymore. And I know that it's not as easy as just kind of rewriting it, but you have to start actually practicing them too. Okay, next topic, core fears. So this honestly could be a whole webinar in itself. If you want me to make a whole webinar on this, I'd be happy to. But love is inherently vulnerable and risky. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. No matter how confident you are, there is risk to it. And even in the movies, we're taught that it's magical and carefree and beautiful, but there's a lot of risk involved, like loss or pain or abandonment or hurt. Like, all of those things are very valid. And the analytical and subconscious mind usually knows this. So as a result, we may try and self-protect. We may try and have all of these what if thoughts, or what if this happens? What if that happens? And that avoids us having to actually sit with the fact that we're just scared. Like, it can be scary, and that's okay. And so we need to tend to these core fears and understand that they're showing up for us if we have any hope of moving through relationship anxiety. I would like to also point out that many of these core fears are likely not just related to your partner specifically, unless they are tied to incompatibilities, which we'll talk about later. But they surface in healthy relationships. So when you're not putting out fires, when you're not worried if your partner is going to text you back, or when you're not worried if they're going to like go out and cheat or whatever, when you're not worried about those like instinctive reactionary things, then you have a chance to actually have these core fears bubble up to the surface. So let me share some of what these are. Please feel free to drop which ones are resonating most in the chat, because all of these are very valid and very human. I think all of us can have many of these come up at any time. So a fear of failure. What if this relationship doesn't work? Or what if I'm responsible for it not working? The fear of making the wrong choice. What if I make the wrong choice? Fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of pain and getting hurt, fear of losing yourself. Like, what if I go too deep into this relationship? Or what if I change? Fear of changes and transitions. Like, oh my gosh, what is it going to be like from, being single into being committed? Like, there's so much change involved with that. Fear of uncertainty. What's going to happen in 1, 5, 10 years from now? And fear of not living up to your potential. That's a big one. So you can have many of these at once. I've had all of them in many different ways. And the thing to note here is that all of these things can apply to other areas. So I used to have all of these core fears come up in my relationship constantly. They still do sometimes, but some examples of these core fears now are moving into other areas like my business. So what if I fail at my business? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I lose all of my clientele? What if I get abandoned? Like, what if trolls comment on my page and like I hurt my feelings? Like, all of these things still show up in my business. And these fears are within me. They're not actually related to Nate in most ways. Of course, they can be brought up as a result of things with my relationship, but it's important to note these live within you. So despite anxiety trying to protect us from these core fears happening, if we don't gain awareness that we have them, it does the opposite effect, and it actually can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what do I mean by that? Okay, I don't know if any of you can feel like this relates, but maybe, just maybe, you're so afraid of the loss of your relationship, failing in your relationship, and the pain that would come from a breakup that you don't actually open your heart, you don't go 2 feet in. And then as a result, you're not actually open to this relationship working. And then either you or your partner decide that it's not actually working anymore. And so then the loss, the failure, and the pain happens regardless. And I don't say that to scare you, because I have worried about this so much myself, but I say it to help inspire you to just understand what's going on and know that you have some fears, and maybe just acknowledge them. Like, oof, I'm actually just kind of scared. Like, and that's okay. I'm allowed to be scared, instead of trying to pretend like, my partner's not perfect enough, and so that's why we can't be together. It's acknowledging, no, like, I'm actually just really scared of this not working out. So please just know that. And that's why there's an opportunity for integration here to firstly know fears are a part of being human, and to just accept that and not feel shame over it, but gain awareness. Like, look back at this list that I shared of these core fears now, or when you catch the recording, and just gain awareness of which ones come up for you most frequently. And then instead of trying to avoid these fears like the plague, just ask yourself, like, what would actually happen if this thing came true? And I know that's a scary question. I do. But so often the fear of it happening can be worse than the event itself. Like, knock on wood, I'm actually knocking on wood. I really hope that me and Nate's relationship is my one relationship. I really hope. I hope we don't have to break up. I hope that nothing goes wrong. But I no longer live in fear of it going wrong, because that was causing me to feel much worse than acknowledging that something could go wrong, and just, accepting that and still trying to make it work regardless. So these core fears, this piece is really important to understand, and really knowing that sometimes the fear of the thing is worse than the thing. This next one is really straightforward and simple. There's no integration work needed for this, but just knowing that anxiety, OCD, and intrusive thoughts, latch onto things that we love the most. So If we didn't care about something, the thoughts would not bother us. And whether that is your partner specifically or relationships in general that you care about, I can't guarantee that. But if we're looking at the forecast and we're like, oh, what if the weather is bad tomorrow? Like, that's not going to bring up a sense of panic, I hope, as the same amount of panic of, well, what if this relationship is wrong? Or what if my symptoms health-wise are a sign of something being deeper? So those things, of course, are going to cause us to have more fear than something that is sort of almost trivial. So just knowing that, like, this is important to me and that's why I care. Next, cultural and societal noise. So whether this is from celebrities, culturally, social media, whatever it is, there are a lot of messages about how things should be in a relationship, and it's really hard to clear that noise. This leads to comparison, grass is greener mindset, perfectionism, and our limited views. We only see a limited view of someone's life, but we think that we're seeing the full picture. And this is another topic I could go into for a whole webinar. I actually proposed that I would have a webinar on this topic, and people voted for this one first. So maybe my next webinar will be how to kind of clear some of these comparison, perfectionist, grass is greener views. But an opportunity for integration here is noticing when you're comparing, noticing when you're expecting things to be perfect, noticing when you're thinking that something else would look better or feel better to you. And just try to be mindful of those things. Like, set some boundaries if you need to. If you have to unfollow your favorite celebrity couple for a while because you constantly feel less than, then that's what you have to do. If you have to remind yourself that nobody's perfect, then that's what you have to do. And you may have to remind yourself of that every single day for years. But please try to gain awareness of when these things are showing up for you, especially when it comes to comparison and looking at other things like celebrities or social media to see how things should be. And I see some of the stuff that's coming up in the chat. Please, just a reminder to save any questions for the end, but I love that you're all having your own conversations. That's so great. But just for anyone who's raised their hand or asking questions in here. All right. Last couple pieces here on relationship anxiety before we move into the incompatibility section. So a big piece of relationship anxiety is asking unanswerable questions. So sometimes the questions that lead us to the most anxiety are actually not answerable, or only we can answer it. And we're looking for answers externally somehow. So these 4 examples came up for me. Are they the one? Only you can answer that. I don't even believe there is such thing as only the one, but only you could answer that question anyway. And so kind of trying to seek some outside answers for this is not going to help you make that choice. Do I love them enough? No such thing as a measuring stick to show how much or little you love somebody. You get to decide. And that involves responsibility, but you decide, do I love this person enough? And can I trust that I can build and grow love? Am I settling? This is very subjective. So one person thinks is settling, someone might not. And I also think that this definition has been blown completely out of proportion, and people are expecting perfection. And if they don't have perfection, we've dubbed it as settling, which is not the case. And then this one, will we be happy in 10 years or 5 years or in the future? It's uncertain. So an opportunity for integration here is being mindful of what questions you're asking yourself, and ask if they fall into one or of 2 categories. Is there a level of responsibility that I need to take within the question I'm asking to make this decision, trusting that you don't have to make a decision urgently, but is this going to be ultimately my decision to make? Or is it a future-based question that you don't have the answer to, so you cannot control that outcome? So it's just important to kind of start being mindful of what questions you're asking, because those questions can often lead to a lot of uncertainty and spiraling. I know I did that for many years. A couple of final relationship anxiety insights before we move into the next section. A key takeaway that relationship anxiety has taught me is that most of my anxieties were not specific to Nate, but love and relationships in general. So that whole core fear list I read off to you, those didn't have to do with Nate. They were my own fears. I got a question from Instagram I wanted to weave in. Is there such thing as the one or the right relationship? No, not objectively, which makes many people, myself included, it used to make me so anxious, because this means we have to take a level of responsibility at choosing what feels right or the one for us. And additionally, a lot of times people ask, is the anxiety based in reality or in things from past experiences, expectations? So we just covered part of that. It can be a mix of experiences, expectations, and past, but it could be things that are related more to incompatibility. So that's what we will dive into next. And just one little reminder again, this relationship or this webinar specifically was not geared towards solving or healing relationship anxiety. So that's why I only spent the first portion of it. And now let's dive into my favorite part of this webinar, which I think is very important to take away, and that is the incompatibility indicator framework. So this is something I came up with to help you have a framework, not a set yes or no, but a way to think about potential relationship incompatibilities and what may be, what may not be, and what's somewhere in between for incompatibilities. Please know that this is not black and white at all. There's no yes or no that is clear for one person and applies to every single person. What may be an incompatibility for me or not an incompatibility for me may be an incompatibility for you. So keep that in mind as you're listening to this section. And a couple of things to note as we are going through this next section here. I really want you to think about levels of acceptance and levels of respect. So we're going to have differences from our partner. I'll dive into that here in a second. But can you accept or respect the difference in how you believe in something or how you perceive whatever it is? If you can't accept or respect it, then that may be dipping into incompatibility. If you can accept and respect the differences, then I would not deem it as any sort of incompatibility. So keep that in mind. And also, please keep in mind, we're not looking for perfect. We're not looking for our partner to check 100 boxes perfectly. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. So let's start off. Let me take a sip of water here first. Been talking a lot already. Let's start off with what may be incompatibility. And again, this is not set in stone, but please keep in mind these three factors when thinking about incompatibility. So your values and your vision, your lifestyle, and your boundaries. And I'm going to, again, go into these with more detail, but a quick overview of each. So Mark Manson says that your personal values are the measuring sticks by which we determine what is a successful and meaningful life. So in your life, what are the things that you dub as the most meaningful? And does your partner agree or respect these things? Lifestyle, how do you want to live your life? And does your partner fit in enough? Like, do they fit in well enough? Or are there things that you can at least agree are different and that you respect? And then boundaries. Have you clearly identified what your hard and fast no's are? And is your partner open to this? Are they respectful of your boundaries? And are they, able to hear your boundaries openly? So let's go into this, and please know that this is such a broad topic, but I wanted to give some thought starters. So why is it important for values and vision to be somewhat aligned? Because if you're not on similar pages or you cannot respect the differences, it will likely lead to challenges and resentment. If you can't accept these things within each other, it's going to probably cause one person to feel like they're giving something up or sacrificing something that's really important to them. So just some thought starters here, no right answers. Family, do you both want kids, or are you both on the same page about being unsure? Do you like to spend a lot of time with your families? Is that something you want to do together with your partner or not? How do you want to raise a family if applicable? Career and growth. Are professional and personal growth or career goals important to each of you? Or if not, can you just respect that about each other? Does one person like to work a ton and the other person doesn't? It doesn't matter what the answers are to these questions, but just starting to think about this. And like, if someone values work as their most important thing, maybe they don't value the relationship as much, and that isn't okay with you. Just thinking about these things. Political, religious, and cultural beliefs. They do not have to be the same, but can you respect the differences? That is a big important piece of this. Relational support. Do you both prioritize the relationship? Does it feel like there is a balance of someone showing up and communicating and caring and loving you? Or does it feel completely one-sided? So when it comes to values and vision, a way to further think about this, and this is going to involve you probably getting cozy with a journal or just getting quiet and thinking about these things. What are the top 1 to 3, not the top 10 or 15, because then it's not all a priority, but what are the top 1 to 3 things that you really value in your life or that you envision happening in your life? Have conversations with your partner, zoom in on these specifically. Can your partner come to respect or accept these things? And you don't have to have a conversation like today, right after this webinar, but just start making sure that you're having these discussions. And what comes up, like, are you guys able to talk about these things? And continue to seek understanding each other until you feel like you know this answer. Lifestyle. This is another vague category, but it's an important one because if you're not on similar pages or able to respect the differences, it will likely lead to challenges and resentment because you are finding yourself judging or being upset with somebody based on how they're showing up in their life. So some thought starters. Again, there's more to lifestyle, but traveling and living. Do you want to be someone that's always traveling or moving around a lot? And is that okay with your partner? Or are they, someone that wants to stay put and never do any of that? No right answers here, but just knowing these things. And even if they don't ever want to do that, can you accept that and travel with other people in your life? Religion and spirituality. Do you have certain religious or faith-based or spiritual-based beliefs? Is your partner on board? Can they at least respect them? Do you need them to be on similar pages? Just getting honest with yourself about these questions. Substances and going out is kind of a vague category as well, but some people love smoking weed with their partner. Some people are like, I could never be with someone that does that. There's no right answer here, but just getting clear. Are you a completely sober person and you can't be with someone that drinks? Just answering these questions for yourself. Play and rest. Do you prioritize relaxation and rest in your life? Does your partner, or do you want them to? Do you need to be on similar pages with this? Or can you just respect that they're on different wavelengths as you are? Well-being and health, is that important for you to share a common interest with your partner about? Not perfectly, they don't have to do everything exactly like you, but is there some level of wanting them to share that interest with you because you want to partake in these things with them? And then finances, I added that to lifestyle, is, are you on similar pages financially about what responsibility you each have financially? It doesn't have to be perfect. Like Nate and I have had many different financial conversations, but can you at least be open to talking about these things with someone? Similar to the values piece, an opportunity for integration here. What are the top 1 to 3 things in your lifestyle that are important to you? Zoom in on them and have conversations around the topic if needed. All right. Next, let's go into boundaries. So boundaries is a big one, and boundaries can kind of apply to this whole presentation, to be honest. But if you don't feel like your partner wants to understand and abide by your boundaries, this will definitely lead to resentment and could even dip into you feeling majorly disrespected, or in extreme cases, feeling like you're in a relationship with abuse taking place. So for me, boundaries are like the hard and the fast no's, especially if they're repeated behaviors. So it's things you're not okay with. You'll clearly identify them to your partner as such, and you want them to be respected. So how to communicate these? There's a great statement I saw on TikTok from a therapist, and she says, when you're communicating boundaries, use if you, then I statements. So if you raise your voice at me, I will leave the conversation. If you physically hit me, I will leave the relationship. So getting clear on these is important. And also knowing that sometimes if a boundary is broken, there's still an opportunity to discuss it and repair it and move forward. It doesn't mean that everything has to be in one and done, but you just have to understand clearly what your boundaries are. So as I've said many times in this presentation already, boundaries are completely subjective, and everything in this presentation is completely subjective. So what may be a no for you is not necessarily a no for somebody else. So being, again, honest and authentic to who you are, not what people tell you you should think. So for me, just some thought starters here: abuse of any kind. Cheating or infidelity can be a boundary. I mean, for many people it is, but some people continue to move forward and have a great relationship afterwards. So if that's your case, like Esther Perel is a great person to look into information on this. Addiction without the awareness or desire to shift it. Like, we all have addictions. I'm addicted to social media. It's fine. But like, if this person is addicted to certain substances and they're not willing to take a look at it, then that could be something that's a boundary of yours. And then disrespecting your values or culture. So boundaries, again, is something that's very important, but just make sure to think about it on your own. So some opportunity for integration here. What are things that feel like hard and fast no's to you in a relationship, either based on past experiences or something you would anticipate not being okay with? And then use the if you, then I format to set these boundaries in your relationship. And just trust that if you notice something that feels icky or off in the future, you can get curious if a boundary needs to be set. Our partners are not mind readers. So aside from very obvious things that you are not wanting, like, okay, I don't want to be hit by you. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we do have to practice communicating these things because everyone likes to be loved differently. And there are certain things that are okay with some people and not okay with others. So just very quickly here, when it comes to boundaries, like I've said, I don't believe it's always a one and done conversation, but this could be a one and done for things like abuse or hitting, or for some people, cheating is a one and done, right? But not everyone who crosses a boundary will do it again. You just have to make sure to communicate it from a place of compassion and trying to understand each other. Okay, now that we talked about what may be an incompatibility, let's talk about what may not be an incompatibility, but sometimes gets branded as such. These three things, again, are not necessarily the end all be all, but they often get thrown out as like, this is why I can't be with my partner. And unless these categories also dip into your values, lifestyle, or boundaries being broken, then I don't think these are automatic incompatibilities. And I wanted to make sure to share that. So personality differences, they're not only normal, but they should be expected. We're not dating our clone. This is a whole other unique human we're talking about here. So we have a chance to learn about our partner, accept them, and grow together as a couple when we have these differences. And one way of actually reframing this is that compatibility actually can mean that you're complementary. So that yin and yang people talk about, like those are two opposites coming together to create the greater whole of something. And so just because you have differences, it doesn't mean that you cannot be in this relationship. Next, there's a big difference between irritations and inconveniences and incompatibilities. So we all have things that come up in our relationship that are irritating or inconvenient. This is not unique to your relationship. This is going to happen in any relationship. I don't think I've ever talked to somebody that has a relationship without getting irritated or things that are inconvenient coming up. So we have to shift away from the belief that we should be in an inconvenience-free relationship. And then lastly, as much as we all hate to admit it, we and our partners have imperfections and flaws. I know some of us are really hard on ourselves, myself included, for these flaws and imperfections. So please know that sometimes we can be overly critical of ourselves, and then that actually translates into us being overly critical of our partner. So again, let me break these things down into more detail here. So with personality differences, they're not automatically an incompatibility. And I want to give you kind of a way to think about these, answering kind of these two questions from Instagram that were submitted of what's the difference between not being compatible and having differences, as well as how can I tell whether disagreements are solvable or not. So the Gottman Institute, which is a great relationship resource, has a lot of research that talks about the differences between perpetual and solvable challenges. 69% of relational challenges are actually perpetual, according to their research, for many, many years, 40 plus years on couples. So what that means is that as a result of fundamental personality differences, there are going to be problems that keep coming up, and 69% of these are fundamental personality differences. So it's not just you and your partner that have these, it's going to be you and any partner that have fundamental personality differences. It's about which ones can I accept? Which ones can I learn to live with? Which ones can I be okay with? So if you have a solvable problem, you can solve it and you can keep solving solvable problems. I will teach you how in the next slide here. And then if you are not able to solve the problem, that may mean it's a fundamental personality difference. For example, somebody is really clean and somebody's a little bit messier. Somebody's really a planner and somebody's more go with the flow. Somebody's really logical and somebody's really emotional. Like those things are just your personality and they're not necessarily going to change over time, but we don't necessarily need to be with someone that thinks and acts the exact same way we do. And so just to reiterate, we all have differences, but if they don't go against our lifestyle, value, and boundaries, we can learn and grow from them. So let's talk about how we do that. The opportunity for integration here, and this is something I think everyone should really do, because I know this is such a big topic and part of the anxiety of worrying if we should be with someone, is really sit down and determine what personality differences between you and your partner feel perpetual and which ones feel more solvable. And then based on which they are, use one of these two processes below. So if they are a perpetual problem, you are very organized and your partner's a little bit more go with the flow and messy. You are the type of person that likes to plan ahead and they like to be spontaneous, like whatever those are, then use one of these 5 below tools to shift your perspective on the belief, or you have to accept that they may be beliefs that dip into lifestyle or value clashes. So there's 5 ways that you can change your beliefs about the personality differences. 1, you can release shame about having these differences. If 69% of these problems in relationships are going to be perpetual, you are not a bad couple for having these. And if anything, you are just part of everyone who is in that category. Secondly, looking for a benefit to your partner's role in the perpetual challenge. So if your partner's more spontaneous, and sometimes that bothers you because you really wish that they were a little bit more organized, maybe you get excited though when randomly on the weekend they whisk you away to a fun date night that they just planned that day, right? So there's usually a benefit to our partner's role. If someone's more logical, but we are more emotional, then even though sometimes we want our partner to feed into our emotions and feel all of the feelings with us, it can actually be really good if they're the logical one that's a little bit more of the steady ship, right? So there's usually a benefit to the role in the perpetual challenge. If you can't find one, that may be something to note. Understand the cause or the root of the perpetual challenge from both sides. So I'm using an example here of sex and intimacy. There's maybe some people that have a higher sex drive and some people that have a lower sex drive. Why? Why is that happening? Does someone really want to have sex a lot to blow off steam and that's their main reason for it? So they want to have sex a lot because they are feeling stressed a lot. And then maybe the other person uses sex as a way to reconnect with their partner, but they already feel really connected to their partner, so they don't feel the need to have sex as much. Try to understand why this is the case. Like, what has led your partner to think or believe or act the way they do? Next, it's always beneficial to look for the common ground between you and your partner, not just focusing on ways you're different. And then lastly, if you can, try and find the humor in the perpetual challenge. If you can't, you can't, and you maybe try some of these other options. But a joke that I always give is like, maybe this person is just always 15 minutes late, so they're running on Sarah standard time. Like, you just kind of laugh it off and you're like, okay, like that's just how they are, and learn to accept that piece. Next, if there is a challenge that is solvable, so like, okay, this person's not doing enough around the house or whatever it is, use the nonviolent communication pillars to talk through this with your partner. It's a great book that I'm reading right now called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And there are 4 steps to kind of sharing these requests. There's the option to observe, share your feelings, share your needs, and sharing a request to help your partner try and do something differently. So let me give a couple of examples of this. I observe that there are dishes in the sink. I feel irritated by that. Just keep it simple. I need a clean sink in order to cook dinner tonight. Would you be willing to clean these dishes out? Super simple. I observe that we have some different opinions on politics and religion. I feel scared by that because I want to better understand what your beliefs are. I need to discuss these things before moving forward in a more serious way in our relationship. Would you be willing to have this conversation with me about this subject this weekend? So I would always try and solve things if you feel like there is a way to solve it, and just see how that goes first before assuming that there's nothing you can do about it. All right, let's move along here. I'm trying to keep this under an hour, but we only have 10 minutes till that happens. So irritations and inconveniences. There's a difference between these things and incompatibilities. I'll just give a couple quick examples of like irritations and inconveniences. Nate slurps his coffee sometimes, and that used to bug me. I was like, I can't live like this. Or sometimes he'll leave stuff around the apartment. Those things are irritating and inconvenient, yes, but is that true to his character as a person? No, it's not like he's doing those things hey, Sarah, I'm going to slurp my coffee, so you get irritated, right? He just genuinely doesn't know that those things are irritating. And I've since changed my belief on how irritating those things are, but also there's options to talk to him about that type of thing, you know? Secondly, if you get anxious after any argument that they are not the one, is your expectation really to have a relationship with zero disagreements? And is that realistic? So I would dub that as an inconvenience. Of course, if it dips into like verbal abuse and it's like a boundary that needs to be set, that's totally different. But if you're able to have disagreements and they feel uncomfortable, but you're still able to move through them, then that is more so an inconvenience. So with this integration wise, you can just reflect on some things that have been causing you to feel anxious and maybe label which of these have, upon further reflection, felt more like irritations or inconveniences to you. And maybe, is there either an opportunity then to share these solvable things with your partner? Or if it's more perpetual, like, can you work on trying to shift your beliefs around the perpetual challenge? And if you can't, can you be honest with yourself about that? Lastly, this one, I wish it weren't true, but we all have imperfections and flaws. If we can't accept them in ourselves, we will likely look out for them in our partner. So examples of these: I told them this before and they forgot, or they didn't do that thing I wanted them to do, or their appearance doesn't look like a celebrity. Insert your own imperfections or flaws here, or don't, because we all have these things. So to integrate this, how can you look to find more compassion for yourself and your partner's flaws and imperfections? Maybe you get your journal out and write, what have I been judging my partner for? Or even, what have I been judging myself for that I wish I could just be a little bit kinder to myself on? And maybe I can remember this person's humanity and who this person is at their core, not just these little flaws or irritations. Quickly, some other information to note about the whole incompatibility kind of category here. So there is absolutely a difference between a hard red flag and more of a yellow flag when it comes to potential incompatibilities. So red flag to me feels like something that's just like a hard and fast no. You don't have to think about it. It's just like, I don't want to be abused in my relationship physically. Like, that's a no. But there are some things that you may need more information on and want to discuss them and investigate them. So a question from Instagram that I got was, where do I draw the line with compromising on different political opinions? So there is no right or wrong answer here, but can you respect the differences in someone's political beliefs? Or do you find yourself constantly thinking, they're so stupid, I'm better than them, like, how could they think this way? So that's a big difference. Like, I have a best friend who is a little bit more liberal leaning, and she's married to someone who's very conservative. And that's been a little challenging over the last 4 to 6 years, but they still have so much love and respect for each other. Some people would be like, that's a heck no for me. I could never do that. So just trying to investigate this further and being honest with yourself. Additionally, you can also just try and see if, like, okay, does this person have things that we do share values or vision on? Like, we both really care about people, but we just kind of have a different way of going about how that care would happen for people politically. So that's an example of differentiating between what feels like a heck no versus, I may need to think about this a little bit more. And I also wanted to share some things that tend to get branded as red flags, but are not necessarily, unless they go against your values, lifestyle, and boundaries. So having doubt, having periods of disconnection, differences, communication challenges, sexual challenges, etc. Those things you can work on and choose to shift within your relationship. Alrighty, so let me give a personal story here, and this was shared with permission from Nate, of what I thought could be a deal breaker or incompatibility for me, and that is Nate's relationship to drinking. So the frequency that this happens is very low, but the impact of when it happens can be very high. There are times when we'll be out having a great night, and then things take a turn and suddenly I feel like I'm the one taking care of Nate, or he's sick, or just something happens and I've branded it as like, he ruins my night, right? And so we've been dating for 5.5 years now. I can, probably count how many times it's happened, but it's happened like once or twice a year. And that used to really bother me. Every single time it happened, I'd be tired, drunk, and anxious, and just completely spiraling. And I used to jump to, what does this mean? Is he going to always drink like this? Is he going to become an alcoholic? Like, I can't marry someone and have them around my kids like this. Like, I was going into all corners of the anxious mind. So I personally have never felt strong enough to leave the relationship over this. It usually takes me about 24 hours to feel less anxious, and then I keep moving forward. Nate is always so apologetic when it happens. He's read books about it. We always reconnect after these moments because he just feels so bad that it happens. And of course, it's not happening intentionally. And so I realized personally, I may be expecting perfection of Nate, that like you can't mess up ever. You can't have any flaws. And I realized, like, imagine if he said the same thing of me. You can't have anxiety or you can't have anything that messes up, right? So I've chosen, as of right now, as of today, to move forward in my relationship, trusting that if this becomes an issue, I will know, right? I don't have to make it an issue now if it's not. And some people may think this is a deal breaker, right? So I can't tell you what to do for your relationship, but I've determined that the anxiety here, the relationship webinar is about, is this relationship anxiety or is it incompatibility? I've decided that the relationship anxiety part of this for me was all of the what ifs. What if this gets worse? What if this messes up our marriage? What if this, what if that, Whereas the incompatibility piece, which is still to be determined, would be if this becomes more frequent, if Nate stops apologizing when it happens or showing any remorse, like that may be then an incompatibility. So I wanted to give that example. It's a vulnerable one. I don't talk about it very much, but I feel like that's one of the most real examples of why I used to get anxious and I worried that was an incompatibility. Additionally, another personal story here is when I let go of my ex in my last relationship, I no longer saw our visions and lifestyle lining up. That is what made it an easy decision for me. This was a fun college relationship, but it didn't transition into my adult life in the same way. I didn't feel like my ex had the same level of respect for the relationship, and I felt like I was giving more. And so even though it was a sad choice, I was able to confidently make that decision and I felt clear about it. There was not questioning. I wasn't like spending like months or years being like, should I do this? Should I not? I was like, no, he's no longer respecting me in the same way. This isn't working for me. I don't see a future with this person. And that was, my clarity of intuition that people talk about, right? So if you haven't already read my blog post on intuition, I dive into why I think my intuition is actually carrying me forward in my relationship, not the opposite. But this was a clear time when I knew I did not want to move forward. Okay, so just a little bit more here before I open it up for Q&A. Before we get into what is a healthy, mostly compatible relationship, I want you to all throw in the chat, and I'll give a couple minutes here for us to review some of these. What does a healthy relationship mean to you? Because sometimes I think we look to others to define this for us. I'd love to get everyone's thoughts, even if it's just quick one-liners or words. Yes, safety, mutual love, compromise on both sides. Yes, this is good. Effective communication, yep, communication and respect, partnership, being willing, yes, to be gentle, comfortable, mutual compromise, yep. Happiness. Yeah, that's a tricky one because happiness isn't permanent, right? So it's a good thing to include, of course, but it's not the only feeling we'll have. Ooh, honest, open, and willing. HOW? That's a great acronym. Thank you so much. Yeah, feeling seen and heard. Wow, these are also great. Okay, I love that you have some ideas for this. Before we go into my definition, the reason I asked you to share some of this is because there is no one universal answer here. As you just saw, there were so many potential reasons that someone might think they're in a healthy, mostly compatible relationship. And so I really want to scream from the rooftops that you get to decide what feels supportive and loving to you. And this is a lot of responsibility, but it's really empowering when you do so, because ultimately you are not necessarily going to get the same answer from everybody about what is that healthy, compatible relationship. And you have to take the information you hear either from me or from other people and really ask, like, does this feel true for me? So with that said, with that disclaimer out there, some thought starters from me of what it means to be in that healthy, mostly compatible relationship. You can see yourself growing with this person and continuing to learn about relationship dynamics as a team. So things like communication, sex, household chores, becoming parents, like you can see you and your partner, even if you're not perfectly on the same page, like you're open and you talk about these things. You share some important values, lifestyle factors, and boundaries are being respected. And you can respect each other's values or lifestyles that disagree with one another. So maybe not disagreed on boundaries, but the values and lifestyle piece, like, can you accept the differences there? You allow for imperfections and flaws for yourself and for your partner, but you talk through them when necessary. There's an absence of disrespect and abuse. You feel supported most of the time, but you also understand that sometimes your partner will be the one that needs support and they can't give 100% all the time. We all have our limits. You feel safe to communicate your needs and desires from a compassionate place. You feel safe to be yourself and you feel accepted by your partner for who you are, and you don't feel like you're wearing a mask to fit into this relationship. And then insert your definition here, right? There's so much else. We had some great definitions coming through. So please just think about this, reflect on what that would feel like for you, and feel free to like have a running list of those things and just try and cultivate that within your own relationship if it feels like you can. All right. Wrapping up here. So that was a lot of information. So please remember what I shared earlier, that you can take some time to let this sink in. There's no need to rush into making decisions or discussing these things with your partner. Like as soon as you hop off the webinar, just take time to let this soak in, revisit it if needed, go back, go through some of the integration pieces, and just take some time and sit with this. Trust that you do not need to answer the question of is it anxiety or incompatibility clearly right away. Trust that what the story I told you about earlier with my ex, or trust that in the ways that I've continued to move forward with Nate and just choose this relationship, like trust that those are both options for you, but that you don't need to rush into something. Continue making decisions from the information you have about this person, the relationship, and your own inner well-being. So is my anxiety really high right now? If it is, maybe I don't want to make a big life-changing decision. And can I continue to trust in this person and the relationship that we have together? Like, what are the things that I admire and respect about that? A couple last things about how to move forward from here. So trust that you can choose to move forward even without guaranteeing the outcome. So this has been a really big shift for me. The future is unknown for everybody. The person that says when you know doesn't know anything beyond just that they're confident in their partner, right? I don't know that me and Nate are going to work out. No one here on this webinar has certainty that their relationship will work, but you still get to confidently choose to move forward despite that uncertainty. That's all we can do. Next, this kind of goes along with that, decide and then keep deciding. So decide I'm choosing this relationship, or decide I can't choose this relationship, but try and be clear, because the 1 foot out mentality isn't going to help you know if the relationship is compatible because you're not going all in. So even if you're still a little bit uncertain, but you want to try to make it work, decide I'm going to make this work. You can't guarantee that it will, but you can still decide I'm going to put both feet in. I'm going to choose this person and see what happens. And when you're making these decisions, make them from a clear-headed and open-hearted place. Don't make them from an anxious, panicked place, because if I made decisions based on my anxious, panicked place, I would not have a business. Me and Nate would probably have been long broken up. So try and get quiet and get grounded and be in like a place of just thinking clearly, not just after you got into a disagreement or something like that. And then lastly, trust that you can find solutions to both anxiety and incompatibility. Neither necessarily mean that your relationship is wrong or bad. So I had anxiety and I was able to move through that. Of course, it still comes up sometimes, but I've been able to move through most of my anxiety. And then I just gave that example of incompatibilities between me and Nate. Like that could have been something I decided wasn't incompatibility, but we talk about it, we move forward, and I trust that we have solved it as best as we can for now. So neither thing necessarily mean the relationship is wrong or bad, but also, of course, the decision is always yours. I'm still not influencing you to stay or go in any capacity. With that said, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds on this, but for every single person that signed up today, if you feel like, okay, I definitely feel like I'm in the relationship anxiety category, I need to maybe think about some incompatibilities, but I don't feel like I am majorly incompatible,
That is exactly why I created my Deconstruct the Doubts course. I'm not, again, trying to sell you on it. Take it, don't take it, but I'm giving everybody $50 off the course if they want to work through that. And Katie, thank you so much, is here sharing that link for you all. And the code is DTD50. So this is the course I created for the person who was in my shoes, who is feeling anxious, uncertain, not sure like how the heck they're going to get through their anxiety, but they know that they want the relationship to work. They know they want to choose their partner, and they really want to work through the reasons they're feeling anxious. So with that said, it is now time for questions. I really want to have people remain anonymous, because there, like I said, is over 300 people that signed up for this webinar. So I think that the best way to do this is for you to chat your question, because again, if I take you off of Zoom, if I take you off of mute, one, I don't think we're going to have the time to get to everyone's questions. And then two, I really want everyone to remain anonymous, because this is getting sent out to a bunch of people. So I'm going to go in order here. I already see some questions coming in. Thank you all so much for doing this. Okay. First one, my partner's values and lifestyles match up, except when he's anxious. When he's anxious, he has bad social anxiety. He isn't able to socialize, and that's important to my lifestyle. I can't tell if it's incompatible or not, because it's not him, it's his anxiety. Whew, yes, okay. So this is, again, not a direct yes or no answer. I'll probably say that like 10 more times. I think you have to ask too, like, is this 100% of the time that that's happening? And if nothing changed, how would that make you feel? And also, like, are there ways that you react when you're feeling anxious that aren't really true to you, that you wish were different about yourself? Like, I know when I'm anxious, I can be really nitpicky and really critical of me. And so if he was kind of like going as that based off of the reason he chose me, he might be like, oh, well, I don't want to be with Sarah because of that. So I think you have to ask yourself, like, how frequent is this? If nothing changed, would I be okay? And also, can I have compassion for the imperfection that is the social anxiety of this person? Because ultimately, when we're anxious, we all have things that are not in the normal MO of us, so to speak. All right, next question. Among people with relationship anxiety, I constantly hear, I love him so much, but, and then they list their anxieties. What if I never felt or feel confident in my love for my partner? Is that a sign of incompatibility? Not necessarily. So a lot of people have kind of immediately heading into their relationship, felt a sense of pressure internally or externally. And so maybe they skipped over that honeymoon phase or the feelings of that love and open-heartedness that some people experience. I would ask yourself, what are the things that have led you to keep moving forward in this relationship, right? So even if you haven't felt 100% confident in your love for your partner, what has led you to keep moving forward? Is this someone that you think that you can grow with? Is this person someone that you respect? And do they respect you? Because love is not a feeling. Love is an action. Love is something we choose. Love is something that we can keep showing up for and be committed to. So I don't want you to worry if you feel love right now, because it may be that your anxiety is blocking that love. But if there's things that we talked about that dip into clashes in values or lifestyle, or your boundaries or anything are being broken, then you want to examine that. Great questions, everybody. All right. How do you work on accepting the irritations and inconveniences? Great question. So I would use the similar framework of kind of like the perpetual solvable problems here. If it really feels like an irritation that like, okay, like someone's chewing with their mouth open and like that really bothers me, like, can I at least acknowledge that and ask them if they would be willing to be mindful of that, right? But if it's more of like something that someone's, doing and you can learn to live with it in some capacity, you go through those 5 steps of reminding yourself that no one is perfect and that irritations and inconveniences happen to everybody. Even if you're with a new partner, there's going to be some new flavor of irritation and inconvenience, right? So we don't get to live a life without those things. So it's kind of about adjusting your mindset to, where did I get the belief that nothing should ever be irritating or inconvenient for me? Am I trying to have like a good vibes only life and relationship?
and just reflect on that for a little bit. Okay, here's another question. Thank you all for these great questions. He has always wanted kids and dogs, and I told him before we started dating that kids and dogs were a deal breaker for me. He said he'd be willing to not have them if it means we could have each other. Is that incompatible? It's been hard with his family seeing me as the bad guy, but he chose to compromise. Oh, so it's tough. I mean, there's a great quote that I share with my clients a lot that's like, don't be the one to say no to yourself. Let someone else say no to you. So that example is like for a job interview, like don't not apply because you're not qualified, like apply. And then if someone says you're unqualified, they can be the one to tell you. It's kind of the same thing here. Like you could end the relationship by saying, okay, we're incompatible. But if your partner isn't the one that is choosing that, then that's their decision to make. You were very clear about your boundaries and deal breakers, and then they chose that. So will they come to resent it in the future? I don't know that answer. No one can know that answer. Hopefully you've talked about that. Like, do you think you're going to come to resent this choice and decision? But also setting boundaries with their family about it is important too. Like, this is their decision. Like, please respect that. And I was very clear all along about my vision and intention with all of this. Great questions, everybody. Oh my goodness, there's a bunch coming in. Okay. How do you work through if you don't feel the same putting in the work vibes from your partner? I'm keen to make it work, but I'm not seeing him want to work on himself. And I feel that the capacity I can work on myself to be able to make our relationship is limited. Okay, so I think this question is saying like, I'm doing more work than I see my partner doing. So this is a common one. I do think that kind of in that fundamental personality differences category, there's usually someone who's more invested in growth and someone who's a little bit less. Like I'm a relationship coach, so I'm the one that's like bringing all these relationship improvement things to Nate. It's not like he's sitting down like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. But in many ways, he's the one that's actually moved our relationship forward more, because he was the steady ship. He was the one that let me have my big anxieties and feelings and supported me through that. And so that actually helped our relationship grow a lot more than maybe like the relationship meetings or like us talking about things that I thought were important, right? So just ask yourself, like, is your partner putting in the work in other indirect ways that you may not have appreciated? Or if you've asked them like, hey, I would love to have you participate in these conversations a little bit more, or I'd love for you to plan a date night once a month. Like if you have specific ways you would want them to show up and they haven't, and then you continue to have the conversation and there's no able or willingness to change on their end, that would be a different story. But sometimes our anxious mind likes to look for ways our partner isn't delivering, but they actually really are delivering in many ways that we're just kind of not noticing. So just think about that. Okay, let's see. Can sexual preferences be part of incompatibility? Me being bisexual versus my partner not being, or vice versa. So I would say this is definitely just a level of respect or acceptance thing. Like I follow a woman who's bisexual and her partner is a male and heterosexual and they're married and they support one another with that. I don't think it needs to be the same under any means, but of course, if you have certain preferences and your partner doesn't know about them and doesn't get the chance to respect them, it doesn't have to be something. I'll clarify that. You don't have to tell them every single preference you have, but if you feel like it's important to the dynamic of the relationship to share that, then do they respect it, right? So I don't think there's a right or wrong here. And I feel like, honestly, sexuality is all on a spectrum. So I feel like we are, I don't know, I don't want to offend anybody here, but I'm of the camp that we are definitely all some level of percentage of on the sexuality spectrum. And so please just take that as you will. Okay. My partner has adopted my lingo, which is a good sign, but now it feels like he's using them as a crutch. I feel like he uses them all the time to the point where I can't tell what his genuine reaction is. How can I reframe this to not bother me so much? My partner has adopted my lingo. Maybe, so like the lingo that you use maybe to talk through your feelings, or I'm not quite sure. Can you give an example of that question? I'll get to it, I promise, but I feel like I don't fully understand it. But if you're trying to have more clarity about what someone's genuine reaction is, you can ask questions and just say like, I'm sensing that you feel differently, but I'm hearing one thing, but you're saying this. Can we talk more about it?
Okay. For me, it's very important to follow a routine, even though sometimes I like exceptions. He sometimes skips class and has a worse diet. He is not at his best momento right now. I feel like in the future, he could have a more organized life, but I still fear that this may not happen. This is an interesting one, and I've had this talk with a lot of clients. The type A, type B type dynamic. So I think there's a benefit, like that complementary thing of yin and yang, like one person being a little bit more structured and one person not. I personally think that can be a benefit, and you can grow a lot from each other in that way. Why is it important for you that they have an organized life? Just being clear on that. Like, is it because when you have maybe kids in the future, you want them to be active in that? Like, getting clear on why it's important that they are organized, and also acknowledge that sometimes we want our partner to be more of something because it's easier for us if they are. So if my partner is more organized, then I don't have to worry as much. Or if my partner was healthier, then I wouldn't have to worry as much about eating bad foods. And then we're actually putting the responsibility on them to improve something in our life. So just being mindful of that. Let's see. A lot of imperfections and irritations come from what my ex projected onto me. Example, dressing a certain way, acting cringy, being too extroverted, and doing too much in public. These are now things I really fixate on in my current partner. This would be a great opportunity to do the integration work from the beliefs and expectations piece. Jot down all of those beliefs. Does dressing a certain way actually matter to me? Acting cringy? Is extroverted a problem? Doing too much in public? Like, looking out for those beliefs and stories you have and fact checking them, asking, is that actually true? What are some other potential beliefs there? And am I maybe taking too much of someone else's beliefs and putting them now onto somebody? And really fact check that, because in many ways, being extroverted is awesome. Everyone's cringy sometimes, right? So like just looking for where this falls on the spectrum of actual irritations and inconveniences or imperfections versus an actual incompatibility, right? And accepting them. I answered about a little bit earlier how to accept them a little bit more. So try and work on accepting them as best as possible. Okay. Question. I have issues with being attracted to my partner. He likes to play video games a lot and it's a real turnoff. I've gotten to a place where I accept he plays, but I'm still struggling with attraction to him and wanting to have sex. What do you suggest for sexual incompatibility? I'm going to make a note. I'm going to send out some sex resources. There are so Esther Perel and Emily Nagoski have really, really good insights into this. When it comes to sexual incompatibility, the example I gave earlier of kind of understanding like the root of it, of why someone feels more likely to have sex or want it more and why one person may less. Also talking to your partner about, are there certain boundaries around the video games thing? Like how often is that not allowed to happen, but like how often does it feel appropriate for both of you? And then also fact checking your beliefs around video games. Why am I turned off by someone who plays video games? What are the benefits of playing video games? Maybe this is the way that the person blows off steam. It's something they're really passionate about. And that could end up being a turn on because it's like, why are they doing this? Is it not necessarily out of laziness, but maybe it's like, that's their way of kind of really connecting back to themselves after a long, hard work day, whatever it is. So try and question why video games equals unattraction. And if you have what feels still like a really strong reason, then you can try and set some boundaries or talk about it further. Whoa, okay, lots of questions coming in there. I see 17 more. So I'm going to try and get through as many of these as I can. Let's see. Okay, next. My partner and I have the same big lifestyle stuff come up over and over because I can't leave it alone. What happens when the same big things keep coming up and I'm not making a decision, yes or no? My partner has 2 kids, moving to the suburbs, and you want to stay in the city. We compromise by keeping an apartment in the city. I constantly think, wouldn't my life be easier with someone else? I'm not sure about the kids thing. I love his kids, but would my life be easier with someone who doesn't have them? And then we're both in recovery sober and I have a lot more time than him and don't approve of his recovery program. I'm constantly worried he is not doing it right. So I think some of these definitely dip into values or lifestyle, as you acknowledged. I think you have to be really honest with yourself. If this is something, kind of tying back to the question, can I accept this or respect it? Because if you're constantly finding yourself resentful about the kids or resentful about spending time in the suburbs, to me, that feels like it's not going to change, right? So I don't want you to feel like you have to sacrifice. There's a difference between sacrifice and compromise. I think sacrificing is giving up something really, really important to you. Compromise is being willing to give a little bit for the greater good of the relationship. So what are the reasons you love this person? Why do you want this to work? And then are these value or lifestyle incompatibilities something that you could see yourself resenting forever? And balance those two out. There's no easy answer to this, but I think that it's really important that you get really honest with yourself, because the kid thing is not going to change. He's always going to have them, knock on wood, obviously, hoping that they have a long, healthy life, but he's always going to have his kids. So that is not something you can change. So if you are going to resent that, being really clear about that. Let's see. I struggle with the word enough. Even you saying, do they match your lifestyle values well enough? I find things to fixate on in every relationship I am in, with us not being similar enough in some way, or that I'm settling and won't be happy. Like, where is the line of how much is enough? I'm the happiest I've ever been in a relationship, and I see a future with aligned values, but there are some lifestyle differences that I am more interested in than I want him to be. So this feels, I wrote a blog post the other day of someone saying, like, I have the best, most perfect partner ever, but sometimes I don't laugh enough with them. You worked hard to kind of clarify that you're the happiest you've ever been, and you see a future with aligned values, but ... So I would tap into your, just asking yourself, is this me trying to have perfect? Like, if you've done this many times in many relationships and there's always one little thing that's not good enough, why is that? What are you expecting? And it is a perfectionist question to ask, when is enough enough? Because it could never be enough. Like, you could always keep growing. So you have to decide, can I accept or respect these lifestyle differences? Because we're not supposed to have the exact same beliefs on everything, right? Like, even if someone is more unhealthy and someone is healthier, like, maybe that person will, like, be healthier in the future, and maybe you will have phases where you're not, like, there can be this ebb and flow. We're not all going to be the exact same forever, but we don't want to hold on to someone changing. We just want to accept that sometimes we're not on the exact same page as certain things. Like, let me try and think of an example for this. Like, Nate, I would say, works more than I do, but it doesn't mean that we're not aligned in that category. Like, I'm a really hard worker too, but I would say he's even more than I am. Or I love socializing and he's more of an introvert. And so, like, there are so many times where I'll go out and make plans and he's at home watching TV. Like, we don't have to always have the exact same things, but it helps when you have an overlap of them and then you focus on those shared pieces. Okay, I am realizing there may be an incompatibility present. A couple months ago, we had a conversation about long-term commitment, marriage, and kids. I'm not sure I want long-term commitment. I'm sure I'd like to have kids, but I'm still feeling it out. He's certain that right now he doesn't know or is unsure about either. That's been unsettling to sit with. I'm having a hard time connecting to him, feeling sure of him. I'm noticing signs or noticing old habits creep in where I'm simply hoping to be chosen, hoping our values will align, and I just have to be patient. But that never worked in the past and left me feeling lost. Could I be seeing this too rigidly, or is it a clear indication? I can't give you that yes or no, but if nothing changed, what would your answer be? And that's a question you have to be honest with, like, because if you're with someone in the hopes that they will change, then you may resent it when they don't. You never know, they could, but there is a very big chance that they won't change their mind about that. So if nothing changed, how would that change your opinion? Think about that. Let's see. There's some other comments coming in, but I don't quite know which question they were tied to. Okay, this is tied back to an earlier question that I asked for clarity on. I have this giggle. So every time I say something funny, cute, or give a compliment to him, he responds with my giggle. It annoys me because it's the only way he responds to compliments or my jokes now. And it's not even like I'm talking to him. It's not even like I'm talking to him if he's responding with how I respond. So yeah, I would just maybe say, like, I'm unclear on if you're doing this because of because you think that I want to hear that, or like I would love to just have your genuine response here. Okay. Thanks to everyone saying they leaving early, but they had work. I'm glad that this was helpful. Okay. I'm going to continue. I'm going to try and get to as many questions, and I may stay on later, but I know that the 90 minutes is almost up, but I really want to help answer these questions for people. I have the time. So if you have to jump, the recording is going to be here, but I'm going to stay on a little bit past the 90 minutes. Okay, next question. I am a super optimistic person. My partner is pessimistic, expects the worst, and tends to be doom and gloom. We laugh about this, but sometimes it's draining. Any thoughts on working through this? Ooh, yeah. I would definitely put that in the perpetual challenge category. And I love that you're already kind of laughing about it. Of course, there's times where like maybe the pessimist is more of a realist and then the optimist is more of like a perfectionist. So there could be ways that balances out. But I would say like, if there's boundaries that need to be set, like you set them. If you continue to be talking about this, like if you're venting for more than 5 minutes, I'm going to leave and go to the other room. Or if you are, emotionally dumping something pessimistic onto me, like I will, like, please ask me if it's okay to do so first or something, like, because I can understand where you're coming from. Like being around a constant pessimistic person can be draining. And if you feel like that doesn't change and you are having a really hard time accepting or respecting why that happens for them, then it's tough because there is no, again, easy answer here, but I would try to also explore like, why is this person so pessimistic? Like what happened that led them to be that way? And I don't know if it's like past experience or trauma. But yeah. All right. Thank you, Katie, for putting the Deconstruct the Doubt link. That's all the questions that I see, actually. I thought there were a lot more messages than there were. Does anyone have any final questions to ask? I'm willing to stay on a few minutes longer. So even if you've already put a question in, if there's anything else that's top of mind here. Oh, yep. Yeah, of course. Throw those questions in. I'm going to stay on. So again, for anyone who's needing to jump off, please feel free. There's still a handful of you here. So please ask the questions. I'm sure others may have the same, even if they're just catching the recording. I'll give you a second to type those out. Awesome. Okay. More questions coming in. Okay. My friends are so happy in their relationships, and I find it so hard hearing them talk about it as I go in full comparison mode. How do I deal with this? Great question. This one is so hard. I've written a blog. I wrote the blog post a while ago about when you know, and I talked about there's different reasons why someone may be more likely to be that like happy, knowing, confident person in their relationship. There are some factors like, is this person more likely to be optimistic or pessimistic? Are they more likely to be confident in their decision making? Are they the type of person that had either minimal past experiences that are causing fear, or maybe their parents got a divorce and like right away they knew, like, I promised to never do that, so I'm going to like go all in into my relationships. Sometimes we don't know, even if we're thinking that we're close friends with somebody, we don't know the inner workings of how their brain works versus how ours does. So try not to make it an apples to apples comparison, because we all view love and relationships in a different way. And so even people who I've been best friends with for like 20, like whatever, however many years, 20 to 22 years, I've had some friends since kindergarten. We view things completely differently. And I've had to accept that like someone being happy doesn't need to take away from our relationship's validity. And also, since I moved through my anxiety, I feel so much happier in my relationship with Nate. But like rewind to 2 years ago, I would have not been able to tell you that. So just trusting that it doesn't need to be perfect right now in order for it to be valid. And also like setting some social media boundaries if you need it. Like, I know it sounds harsh, but there are times when we want to expose ourselves to our triggers and work through them, but there are some times when like, I don't know, like maybe you just need to mute someone for a little bit and like just circle back when you're feeling a little bit more confident in your own self. Let's see. Is a toxic family in-law situation a deal breaker if they make me depressed and anxious and they are a huge part of my fiance's life? Oh my goodness, no right answer here. Sending you a lot of love for this question. There's so much context that I don't know, like what boundaries have or haven't been set by you, like how supportive your partner is of you and this relationship, like what exactly is going on. I think you have to ask yourself that question, and like based on how often you see them, how involved they are in your life. I would never answer that question for you in the first place. Like I told everyone, I'm not going to give any yes or no's here, because for one person it may be and for another it won't. So I would just get a little bit more clear on like, how is this going to affect you moving forward? And is your partner on the same team as you about setting these boundaries, etc.? Okay, next. My partner is the greatest. I've just changed so much. I don't know if he's what I want right now. The fact that he is willing to go along with me is frustrating because I want him to lead and be the man of our household. I know if I were to meet him today, I wouldn't be dating him. Yeah, I mean, change and growth happens. And if you don't feel like you're growing together, then it could also feel on the opposite side that you're growing apart. The thing of like, I don't know if I would be dating him if I were to meet him today, that's a tough one for me because I have some, I don't know, I feel like there's ways to continue growing as a unit. So I don't want to say that that's an automatic sign, but if you feel like you're not on similar pages, if everything we talked about earlier, like the values, the lifestyle stuff, if that's not really clear and you're not on similar pages with that, if that's what you mean by you've changed so much, then that would be something to note. But if you've changed a lot and your partner appreciates your change and you can appreciate that maybe they haven't been changing as much, but leave room for them to still grow and evolve, food for thought. No right answer again with that. But try and just reflect on like the incompatibility indicator framework we talked about and see where some of these things fit in. All right. I'm in a brand new relationship. Right from the start, I had a lot of anxieties. I would go through moments of feeling very connected to feeling myself withdraw. I took this webinar in hopes I would try to understand whether this was intuition or incompatibility. Listening today, I've been so focused on my anxieties and myself that I feel like I've missed paying attention to him. What would be your advice going forward? So it's okay, first of all, if you have a lot of anxieties from the start, right? Like I mentioned that not everyone has that honeymoon phase. There could be many reasons why this anxiety is coming up for you. So I would use like the next foreseeable future to really try to get to know who this person is, their character, what do they believe, what do they value, like what do they want to have in their life and their lifestyle. And if you mean missed paying attention to him in the sense of like you haven't been giving your all to the relationship, try to see how it feels to commit, even just in your head, to like, this is who I want to move forward with for now, just for the time being. Like for now, this is who I want to move forward with. How is it different if I act like that instead of acting unsure and like something's going to go wrong? So really just use like your own curiosity to try and continue getting to know this person. All right. What are some signs of an abusive relationship and how do we know if we are in a healthy one? I can send an article out about this abuse signs. I feel like this is something you have to honestly, on your own terms, kind of like review. So there's emotional, verbal, sexual, physical, and financial abuse. And there could be others that I'm not factoring in, but as far as like if we're in a healthy relationship, we kind of touched on that. Like you have to create your own definition of what that means, but I gave you some thought starters of if you're in a healthy relationship. So definitely go back and rewatch that section. And then as far as signs of an abusive relationship, I'll send out a resource that I have on this. It's actually in the first welcome intro of Deconstruct the Doubts as well. Like there's a resource about what an abusive relationship could look like, because it takes kind of reviewing some of those symptoms on your own and deciding if it feels relevant for you. There is no
objective abuse. Like I said, for what could be wrong for one person may not be for another. So just familiarize yourself with emotional and verbal, I would say maybe abuse, because those are the ones that are kind of like, what do those mean? Physical is pretty obvious, like hitting or, like domestic assault and all of that. And then sexual is like crossing sexual boundaries, like consistently, and like really just, all of those things. So I would become familiar with emotional and verbal abuse and see what resonates with you or not. All right. It's my first serious relationship, so I struggle with differentiating between my anxiety or not having anything to compare it to, or if it's my perfectionism. Yes, great question. I think if I'd leave, I would be able to explore if he really is as wonderful as I think he is. And if I leave, I might regret it. But another part of me thinks that I need to leave to find that out. Any advice on battling this when you just got lucky with your first relationship being so incredible? It's hard to judge with no other baseline. Oh man. So this is tough because that wasn't my experience, but I think for me, it's like that whole thing of like, I need to leave so that I have something to compare it to is kind of like, it's like for me living in Sweden, I'm in Virginia right now, but I lived in Virginia my whole life and I moved to Sweden, and everyone that sees it is like, oh my gosh, like living in Europe, it's so amazing. And it is amazing. There's so many great things, but there's also parts of it that are hard and challenging. And so I can appreciate like learning that lesson now that I've moved to Europe, but I probably could have already thought ahead and realized, oh, well, living in Europe is not like this fantasy, right? So I think that some of what you're saying makes so much sense of like, I need another relationship to compare it to. And some of it is about just finding the gratitude and appreciation for what you do have now and trusting that if that changes, then you can do something, or taking responsibility for actively leaving the relationship, knowing that you might regret that decision in the hopes of gaining new experience. So this is going to be one of those decisions that there's probably not this like magical, easy answer, but you have to really take some responsibility for either decision. So if you choose to stay, like really work on the belief that says that you can't just enjoy this relationship now. And if you leave, take responsibility for the fact that you may feel some type of way about it. All right. I am in full anxiety spike mode. I was the one that wrote about the 2 kids and suburb recovery. The positive end is that he's also the most amazing, wonderful, empathetic, emotionally available person I've ever met. And by the way, I love his kids. Okay, this is great context that I don't know some of these things as I'm answering. He wants to support me in all that I have to do. He's cool if I want to travel, live in the city, spend time abroad. We have an 8-year age gap. How do I just live in the moment and wait and see? That's like the magic question, right? How do we just live life? So for me, I would recommend reading my intuition blog post. I will send that out. Intuition blog post. Read it and see for yourself if it resonates, because I've chosen to trust that if my intuition is screaming at me like this is the wrong choice, then I will know it. And I trust that if I don't have that clarity, then sometimes I need more information or more time to pass or more something. Like with the Nate drinking situation, I trust that if it becomes a deal breaker, I will know it. Or I would have to trust that if I made that decision, that I would have to live with whatever consequences it was, leaving the relationship and standing my ground that like, that's the reason why I left, which I haven't felt strong enough to do. So either way, there's no easy answer. I posted the other day, whether you choose to stay in your relationship or go, it's still a big responsibility, right? There's no like right answer, but you have to take accountability for your choice. And if you're choosing to stay, you have to try to go all in, right? Maybe that's taking Deconstruct the Doubts. Maybe it's getting a coach. Maybe it's processing it in therapy more, but like try to work through the anxiety piece if you choose to stay, because you owe it to yourself and you owe it to that relationship to decide, okay, what would it be like to go all in, right? And then if you decide to go, you have to trust that whatever happens, you will be okay.
but that you might regret that decision and you might come to think I shouldn't have done that, and you'll have to live with that choice, right? So just taking responsibility for it. And as far as living in the moment, it's just about every single day making those small but mighty choices that add up to your life. Like, how can I choose to love my partner today? Or how can I choose to do something for me today? Like going into the city or doing something that really fills my own cup up. And I would recommend also having some sort of like mindfulness practice, like journaling, meditating, going for walks, like getting out in nature, doing some of these things that like get us out of our head and try and connect us back into this moment, because this is the only moment we ever have. We can think about the future all we want, but the future is like 10 minutes ago, right now was the future. And in 10 more minutes, that will be the future from now. But in the moment, it will feel like the present. And so all we ever have is just like this present moment here. So that was getting a little philosophical, but okay. My boyfriend cheated on me by flirting on OnlyFans. I have been having a really hard time getting over it. It's been almost a year. I feel the need to check his phone. He doesn't really come on to me sexually, so it starts to give me anxiety. I started setting boundaries to help me. One of them was no porn, and I caught him watching it. He always feels so bad and tells me he's sorry, but we keep moving forward and then moving backwards. I just don't know if I'm being too harsh on him because of my fears or if he's going to get worse. We don't know if he's going to get worse, but some of these boundaries that you might want to set are if you, then I statements like I talked about earlier. If you continue watching porn, then I cannot be in this relationship. It may sound like an ultimatum, but if that's a hard and fast boundary for you, then you have to be honest with yourself about what that is. And there's a difference, I would say, between a boundary and an ultimatum. An ultimatum is like, if you ever watch porn again, I'm leaving, versus if you continue to do that, then I will choose to be not in this relationship. So I highly recommend checking out Esther Perel's work on infidelity, because there's a lot of concepts in there that I think she would explain much more eloquently than I would. But I think your boundary setting may need to be a little bit more focused on your actions. What are you going to do if this person breaks a boundary again? Because you can't control their behavior, but you can control yours. All righty, let's see. We have a few more messages. Okay. I'm going to give myself a hard stop, by the way, of 2 p.m. Eastern. So there's about 20 more minutes for questions here. At the beginning of the relationship, I felt shame around being my true self. I would have had feelings of being too much. I know he's a different person now. I'm still having fears around expressing myself, like dancing and being myself. How do I get out of my own head? Well, that would be a great question for me to have a perfect answer to, getting out of my own head. I still get in my head a lot, so I'm just being a little bit lighthearted there. But you eventually are just going to have to slowly but surely like take baby steps here and do some of these things, because if you're hiding part of yourself, but you have acknowledged you are hiding yourself because of yourself and it's not because of this person, then you're the only one responsible for making those decisions. You have to take that responsibility. I'm the one, if I want to dance or be myself, like that's on me. And if I don't do that, then what am I giving up by not being my true authentic self here? And you don't want to analyze your partner's responses to that, but you probably should be curious about their responses. Like, can they respect this part of myself? All right. In a non-anxious period, my partner and I discussed getting engaged. I know he's planning on doing it at some point this year. Now I'm in a bad place with my relationship anxiety and getting more scared. If the relationship anxiety goes away, it will be the best thing ever. But what if he asks when I'm in a bad relationship anxiety spike? I have a blog post on this of engagement or wedding anxiety. So trusting that you don't have to be in 100% like joyful, blissful period in order to get engaged, but also you're in a future-based thought, and that probably is exacerbating the anxiety. I know it sounds like it's almost too simplified, but what if I'm anxious when he proposes is probably making your anxiety actually worse. Instead of diving into the tools you learned into this webinar, or maybe diving into Deconstruct the Doubts, whatever it is, but like taking accountability for your relationship anxiety and knowing that in a non-anxious period, you were really excited about that. So what changed that has led you to be back in an anxious period? Are you expecting to feel anxious when you get engaged? Maybe that's it. Maybe you're giving yourself a timeline for when the anxiety should be gone. Maybe you're comparing to what other people would feel when they get engaged. Like, what's coming up that's causing you to feel more anxious now? And how can you, one, work on that, but two, have more compassion for yourself of, even if I am anxious, I can still consciously choose this person because I know that when I'm not anxious, I want this. Okay. The next question. We are already engaged. Immediately after the proposal, I started questioning everything. Haven't found peace in the decision due to the perceived incompatibilities. We've set a date in November 2023, which is pretty far out. What are your thoughts on delaying the wedding versus calling it off entirely? So I would just be curious, like, what are their perceived incompatibilities, and are you able to kind of address some of them earlier than, I mean, I would say you can delay the wedding, but like, more importantly is, what are the perceived incompatibilities, and can you use the tools we talked about in this webinar to kind of address some of them? Can you either solve some of the ones that feel solvable? Can you change your perspective on the ones that don't feel solvable? And if you can't, and you don't think you can change your perspective, then you might have to be clear that those are actually full-on incompatibilities that you don't feel comfortable with. So I guess my question back would just be like, what's going to be any different if you delay the wedding? Like, I know that we don't want to rush through these decisions, but like, can you spend the next few months like trying to talk through some of these incompatibilities, perhaps? All right. Let's see. I'm going to summarize this question. Any tips for setting boundaries or asking for more patience about waiting to get engaged? I've been very open about my relationship anxiety with my partner. He was really excited about me attending this webinar. He's been very similar to Nate and supportive, which is great in his responses. I think, I mean, if your partner's already aware of your relationship anxiety, just say like, hey, I would really appreciate if we can continue this discussion. And like, I would really appreciate just coming to a decision together before you do anything like proposing. And just say like, are you willing to discuss that with me? And I'm so excited at the idea of a future, but right now I feel like I'm just in my head about it. I wouldn't be on these webinars or like doing this work if I didn't care about you. Are you able to give me more time? And just be really candid. But it sounds like your partner's really supportive, which is great. I will send out the blog post I mentioned. I will email those out. One question was, where can I find the blog posts? I will email out the blog posts I referred to and my general blog link. Blog. Awesome. Yes, someone said, I'm realizing that a lot of this is also coming to terms with the fact that you have to be accountable and responsible for whatever you choose. Yes, 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 yes. Oh my goodness, so good. There was more context of the question above, but I'm choosing to move forward. Yes, thank you. Oh my goodness, amazing. Thank you guys so much for joining. I will be sending out the recording for those who, of course, were not able to be here live. I'm going to send some of these resources I mentioned. I will also share the link to Deconstruct the Doubts again, if anyone feels like that's something they want to do. There's no expiration date to the codes, so like feel free to jump into that anytime. The $50 off is available to anyone who signed up for the webinar. So thank you all so much. If you had any other comments about the experience, would love to have them either via email or direct message, whatever feels good. And thank you again for just being here and for staying on extra time. So have a great rest of the day, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and end this now and see you all soon. Take care.